All right, thank you one more time. The program's still on your television this morning on ITV, and we are back to Benin and now. Now, the crackdown on immigration offenders is coming. The reality of it all is coming one more time. And of course, you know that when Donald Trump came into power, it was something that he talked about. And he has done so many things to ensure that immigration offenders are really brought to book in the United States of America. Now, the latest of it all now is that Donald Trump has revoked over 6,000 student visas, in the U.S. And now, these are foreign students all across the nations of the world. And we understand that Nigerian students are also involved too. Well, to look at all these issues this morning, we are so privileged to have a foremost public affairs analyst and of course a political analyst too. Ahmed Mamodu is joining us virtually this morning, all the way from United States of America. Mr. Ahmed, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, my brother. Good morning, viewers, and thank you for this opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you.
Okay. All right. Now, some of the information that we are following is that the U.S., let me just read it out to you now, is that the U.S. Department on Monday said many of the visas revoked involve violations such as assault, burglary, and driving under alcohol influence. Then also the U.S. Department has revoked the visas of more than 6,000 international students for overstays and violations of the law. Then this announcement comes amid an ongoing crackdown on immigration and international students carried out by President Donald Trump's administration. The department on Monday said many of the visas revoked involve violations such as burglary, assault, and alcohol influence. Then I remember sometime in June this year that the administration placed a total ban on visas, student visa and all that. The U.S. said that they were not granting visa to foreign students. But recently we understand that that ban has been lifted. And the condition is that if you must come to U.S. For study, then of course you must unlock your social media platform for scrutiny. That was the directive that was given before this recent development now, that over 6,000 U.S. Student visa, has been revoked in the U.S. Now, give us an insight. What is really going on in the U.S. as it stands now?
Thank you again, Evans. Thank you for this opportunity to kind of weigh in on some of these very important issues. So let us cast our mind back to where all of this actually began. Well, for that, we have to go as far back as 2018. It was widely reported at the time, that during a policy meeting, the then president, newly elected president, Donald Trump, referred to some African countries as shithole countries.
Now, please, we'll
Countries
take
where,
exception to that word now. You may have to
well,
retract that.
I'm repeating him verbatim. It's not my word. These are the
I
words that.
know, but that may offend some viewers this morning. Please, so we'll take
Okay, so
exception to that.
let's take that out. So what he had an expletive definition of certain African countries, and one of those countries in question was Nigeria, unfortunately. So what was his grouse? His grouse was certainly that our immigrants would come and they will refuse to return. So now let's dial ourselves back to current 2025. Now, the words that triggered most of all of these reactions is we have enough problems of our own. How was this triggered? The United States invited Nigeria to accept prisoners in an exchange, well, not an exchange program, more like a deportation program where they would send prisoners to destinations outside of America to reduce costs and to use them as transit points before returning them to their countries of origin. So what they proposed was to bring about, I think, 300 or so Venezuelan deportees to Nigeria. But then our Minister of the Interior, Minister Tega, I think it was his name, he now said we have enough problems of our own and we are not able to accommodate foreigners in our prison system. We are barely able to accommodate ours. Now, this immediately triggered a response on the United States side, and that response was visa and tariff restrictions. So to break it down, yes, there was visa restriction, but it was not just only on the student side. So to give you a little bit of background, what now happened was immediately the United States said they were revoking the multiple entry allowances, multiple entry privileges that Nigerian visa holders used to enjoy, multiple entry, multiple visits. First of all, they revoked that and said all visas going forward will only be restricted to 3 months single entry. Previously, people used to hold 5-year multiple entry visas. They were now rescinded and restrained to 3 months single entry visas. That was reflected on the general population of Nigeria. It included business visas, it included visas for medical tourism, it included visas for students. Now, in addition to that, those penalties, there was a trade restriction that was added onto Nigerian trade with the US, a 10% trade tariff. So the sum of this was, as a result of our response to them saying we cannot do this, that was the response that we got. So some of this now came and then snowballed into what we are currently experiencing now. And then we had further of an issue where there was a limit put on the visa validity, which I've already explained. The second part of that policy was a pause on new student visas. So they had ongoing interviews for people who were supposed to resume studies, I believe pretty much around now, between August, September, and October. That was when the new school session would start. So there was an immediate pause. And then they said the pause was to enable them to gather more information on the people, on the applicants, and their social media status. Why was this done? Because they had realized that most of the pushback to some of their unfavorable policies were coming from the university system. A lot of your viewers will be aware that there were a lot of riots initially when Donald Trump came into office, and the students were the forefront of these riots, demanding that some of these policies that seemed inhuman at the time were revoked, and principally against the administration's policy towards Israel and the Gaza settlement and the Palestinians. So they said they need to look at your social media history and see the kind of activism you've been involved in before even granting you that visa. So that was another one. And then they now expanded the travel restrictions. So what the travel restriction meant is that even if you are a Nigerian domiciled in another country trying to get into the US, there will be some restrictions placed on you if your principal passport is a Nigerian passport. Now, to come down to the particular question of today, how did it affect students? So the administration now placed a ban on 6,000 visas that had already been issued. And then they withdrew some of them. Some of them were revoked, some of them were canceled. But to be specific, it only affected 29 Nigerian students. So we'll bring it down from 6,000 to 29. The 29 Nigerian students, even with that 29, Nigeria ranked number 4 of the number of revocations behind countries like Indonesia, China, and so on and so forth. So Nigeria had 29 visa revocations for the students. And the impact of this meant that those students were not even given time to either round up their studies or to receive any form of a settlement. They were just bundled and then asked to be deported. So that is currently the situation. 29 of our students were revoked, were sent back, and a pause was initiated on any more students being allowed into the country until all of these new policy directions had been implemented and put in place.
Now, let us also talk about the area because this seems to be a breach of contract now. I mean, you said 29 students have been involved now, 29 Nigerian students. We understand that these students have paid their school fees in various universities in the country. Now, give us an insight one more time. Is it that their school fees is going to be returned back to them? Because we also understand that any moment from now, these students are going to be bundled back home. So is the U.S. government returning their school fees or every other school that fees that they may have paid in their field of study?
So Evans, unfortunately, that is an unclear area because all of these universities and all of these, it's not like we're talking about one particular university or one particular place or one particular state. There are 50 states in Nigeria and there are multiple universities that run across. but the only commonality is what they call there's a student monitoring body that allows international students to register, and their location is able to identify it, so that at any point in time they be traced in case something like this happens. So unfortunately, what has happened is that those people who are affected have now had their visas revoked with immediate effect. In some instances, I'm to assume that in some instances, some of these schools will probably prorate the expenses that they've incurred. For example, if they're supposed to have been there for a year and they've only been there for 6 months, they may, there's no certainty about this, and don't quote me either, but they may, on humanitarian grounds, refund the unused portion of either their accommodation fees or their study fees or whatever it is. But we cannot only look at it from that point of view. There's also the fact of livelihoods of these students. It's very difficult to work in the to go to school in the United States without working. So they must have incurred some other bills. They will have their rent. They will have all sorts of bills that they incur to make life a little bit more comfortable for them. So to just pluck them off the street and send them back home is, to say the least, very inhumane. But it's a government policy, and the enforcement of immigration standards right now is over the top. You have ICE officials just walking up to people who even come for legal days in the court to either adjust their status or what, and then they are taken out of the country. So we're in a very difficult place right now, and there's no guarantee as to what they are going to be able to get back from the expenses that they've made, unfortunately.
Now, what do you make of the claim now? Because the claim that the U.S. authorities putting forward is that these students that have their visas revoked, they've been found to be involved in burglary activities, driving under the influence of alcohol. Then, something that also suggests that they were also involved in anti-Semitism, if I got that correctly now. So, what is the truth about all this claim, Mamadou?
So unfortunately, a lot of this is very amorphous and very difficult to actually pinpoint because they did not individualize, they just generalized. Now, imagine this scenario, if you will, for a minute. How are you going to take 6,000 visas, revoke them, and then just say that they were tied to assault, driving under the influence of alcohol, activism? So it's difficult to say what is actually what. Of those 29, we cannot even tell you specifically what they are supposed to have been accused of. So what the government now is doing is pretty much saying, if we don't want you here, we can trump up the charges and pretty much just tell you, go back to where it is you've come from. And that is what we have seen happen in this case. Now, that's not to say that crimes were not committed, but usually in the system here, there has always been, just like anywhere it's supposed to be called an advanced country of the world, where you are innocent until proven guilty. So these people should have been given the right to come to a court system, at least to the judicial system, and say, I was accused of XYZ, and this is possibly true, or this is possibly false, and allow the judiciary to come to the conclusion and say, yes, you've been found guilty of whatever has been put on you, and the consequence of it is XYZ. But this was not the case at all. These people were simply rounded up and told that because of, now, this is even what even makes it more confusing. Of some of these cases,
Yeah,
they are reported.
Ahmed, we need to take this break now. Let's quickly go for a break. We'll be right back. Please stay tuned.
TMI, every opinion counts.
All right, thank you one more time. The program's still on your television, this morning on ITV. We are looking at the crackdown on immigration offenders according to the U.S. authority, this morning. And the latest of it all now is the 6,000 student visas that have been revoked by the U.S. government, of which some of these students are Nigerians. And now we have Ahmed Mamadou this morning joining us via Zoom, all the way from the United States of America. Now, Ahmed, tell us, the Nigerian Embassy in the U.S., what are they doing about all this, developments? Are they aware? What are their reactions?
But we have to assume that the Nigerian Embassy, of course, will be aware because the spirit of reciprocity, the home country must be informed of whatever actions any local government, any local authority is taking against students from that country. but pretty much beyond just being informed and perhaps if it comes to them facilitating the return of those students, there's really not much else they can do because it's a policy framework that the local government is implementing and saying, look, you are in breach of XYZ and we would like you to immediately be taken out of our property, our territory. And so it must be done, whatever. So the only interaction they'll probably have is to assist and maybe to be notified. And that's pretty much all that they can do.
Some of the feelers that we are getting back home is that some of these students now, particularly the Nigerian students, are, taking advantage of neighboring countries, escaping to countries like Canada and all that. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, there has also been an influx of an exodus of people leaving. I cannot say if it's the students in particular, but there's always the resistance factor where people who feel that their livelihood is threatened and they don't want to go back to either Nigeria or whichever country it is they come from, try and make their way to other neighboring countries. Shares a border with America on the northern side, Mexico on the southern side. So those are options that people to explore just to avoid coming back home.
All right, but what do you make of this desperation? I mean, if what you're saying is anything to go by, that students may take advantage of moving to neighboring countries like Canada, what do you make of this desperation? Because what the U.S. authorities seems to be saying is that they come under the pretense that they are coming for school, they are coming for education in the U.S. And of course, they get there, they are involved in some other things. I mean, for this student now to be considering moving to other neighboring countries, then of course it shows some level of desperation. So what do you make of this?
So what has happened, unfortunately, is that the administration of Donald Trump has somehow criminalized immigration. Immigration is not a crime. Immigration is not a crime either in the US or in most advanced countries of the world. There has always been immigration. There has always been economic immigration, financial immigration, educational immigration. For whatever reason, a human being decides to move from one point to another to better their life, it's not a crime. There's legal immigration also, but you see, this present administration has criminalized the whole concept of immigration. And unfortunately, this has led to, let me quickly point out that in a recent poll, Nigerians were found to be the most educated subgroup of any immigrants in the US currently. We have the highest number of doctors, PhD holders, master degree holders, etc., etc. So the idea that they come here and then they become somehow a burden on the society is not entirely true. And also, let's not say that that falls for all of the immigrants that come here from Nigeria. But by and large, they are productive members of the society. So to criminalize them to the point where they have to exodus or move to other countries is very sad indeed. Now, when somebody decides that he wants to immigrate to better his life and the opportunity is closed or restricted to him, out of desperation, they will find a new way to go. There are Americans, as we speak now, who prefer to live in Nigeria, some who prefer to live in Ghana, and etc., etc. So immigration is not by itself a crime. But when you come to a nationalistic environment like this present administration has created, that's why you are seeing it all going haywire.
All right. So the reactions back home also is that, as it stands now, you talked about reciprocity a while ago, which is good. But as it stands now, the Nigerian authority back home is seems not to be reacting, to this development. Little wonder when and how the Nigerian authority is going to react to this. Now, what would you say? What would you want to suggest if any reactions are going to be made in this direction? What would you suggest?
So, Evans, that's a very good question. I think our authorities were caught on the back foot because some of these actions are not taken out of context. For example, like I gave you the background of where this policy possibly came from. So, in refusing the invitation of the US government to accept those deportees on Nigerian soil, they should have been prepared for some kind of backlash. And this backlash, to be honest, was extreme. It wasn't only on the students. Like I said, it was on the general population. So they should have been expecting some kind of backlash. But I think that what the local administration, the Nigerian government was basing their faith on was that idea of reciprocity, like you mentioned. So what reciprocity means is that as long as the Nigerian government is allowing Americans to come into Nigeria with 5-year multiple visas, the United States government must reciprocate that gesture and allow Nigerians to enter the US with 5-year multiple entry visas. But what the US government came out and said is that there is no such thing in the books, that all they have is a record of Nigerians only granting Americans 3-month single entry visas. So by that theory, by that practice and policy of reciprocity, they are bound to reduce the Nigerian immigrants or visas to that same standard. So there's a little bit of confusion here. And the administration, I understand, the Bola Ahmed Tinubu-led administration, has come out to say that that's not factual, but there have been high-level meetings between the two governments to try and iron out some of these things and possibly find a middle ground. But to restrict, Nigeria and the US has a long history of trading, partnership, educational development, medical, etc., etc. So to reduce the movement of people for 3 months single entry is ridiculous, to say the least. And I hope something is going to be done soon to kind of ease the burden of travelers in that regard.
All right, so Ahmed, I want you to speak more on what you just said, that on records, the Trump administration discovered that Nigerian government has not granted more than 3 months of visa to Americans. What we see found out is that Americans don't even want to stay more than 3 months in Nigeria. So what is the truth? Which are we going to follow?
So, well, the idea behind that reciprocity is simply that on its face, if we grant you 1 year and you must grant us 1 year. Now, the fact that you may not want to use that 1 year visa is an entirely different matter. If Americans come and then they decide that maybe they are coming for work, some of them work either in Chevron or the oil companies or in other industries, and they only come for periods or shifts and they go back, that has nothing to do with the validity of the visa itself. But the argument that the Americans are putting forward is that we only issue them 3 months visas, and so they are bound to only issue us 3 months visa. I don't believe it personally. I don't believe that the Nigerian government only issues 3 month visas, because there is usually a multitude of visas that you may choose from. There's sometimes the 6 months, the 1 year or 2 years, and the 5 years, whatever it is. But to be honest with you, I cannot speak authoritatively on what happens on the Nigerian side. However, if the Americans are making the argument that that is what it obtains, the Nigerian government is bound to come out emphatically and disprove that assertion so that it can be taken as nonsense, the nonsense that it is. And they need to do this with urgency. They need to not just come out, they need to show us the documents that says, look, these are the options available to Americans when they come here. So if the American government is saying that, it is false. Their failure to do that reinforces the argument on the American side, which is very unfortunate. So there is also a lag here, and we need to tell our government that if this is false, come out and make it emphatic. Show us the visa requirement and how many visa options are available to foreigners when they come in here, that America is saying X, Y, Z. And if it is false, let us know that that is the case.
All right, so the surge for Nigerian, becoming foreign students outside the country has increased for the past decade now. It is not only in the U.S. U.S. happens to be one of the best destination that Nigerians want to go to. You have, Nigerian students also going to Canada, and most of them going to the UK. Now, we have federal universities, state universities, big universities in Nigeria, but these students don't want to, settle for education here. Well, at the risk of not trying to ask a question, you probably know the answer, or the answer is available on the lips of every Nigerian. Now, what do you think Nigerian government should be doing now? I mean, so that, because this is more or less a national embarrassment to the nation. What should Nigerian government be doing?
That's an interesting observation, Evans. And I am happy to report that I was following the news recently. I'm sure you are aware too that the National Assembly was proposing a ban on certain categories of public officers and their children from leaving the country to either go for education or medical services. That would be a welcome thing, but it's a bit myopic in the sense that people will always look for the best service that is available to them. And if they can afford it as private individuals, then they should be allowed to explore as many options that is available to their resources as possible. Having said that, it's a different kettle of fish if public officials, the ministers, the children of governors, or government agent leaders are allowed to leave the country in search of greener pastures that their own parents are not allowing the Nigerian youth to explore locally. So yes, these are some of the avenues that should be explored. And yes, it is an embarrassment. Look at what was reported here recently. They said when this policy came into effect, 20,000 visas were put on hold. Just think about that number, 20,000 visas of students. Imagine the cost implication of 20,000 people leaving Nigeria and what it will cost in the depletion of foreign exchange, etc., etc. So these are issues that need to be tackled and they need to be addressed. As a first step, we need to help our youth understand that, yes, there are greener pastures, but sometimes it's better to start here, build on yourself, get to a certain age, and then you can go and explore other opportunities. But as long as they find that that is more attractive to them, there's hardly anything anybody can do.
We understand also that other nations also, buckling up. Take, for example, the Canadian authority also trying to replicate what Donald Trump is doing. And the UK authority too, because like what was said a while ago, that we have Nigerian students in Canada, Nigerian students in UK, if not for the war in Ukraine. Nigerian students were also there. But you and I saw what happened when the war began between Ukraine and Russia. A lot of Nigerian students had to hurry home and all that. Now, should, in case, other nations of the world start taking this step that the U.S. government is taking now, can we handle all this?
So to be honest with you, I think this is probably going to be, it's a short-sighted policy, and I don't think it's going to last for very long, to be honest, because there's also the income component of foreign students who come and then how they are handled. So let us use Canada as an example. Canada has a different system of monitoring the intake of foreign students, and they monitor them on a closer basis than the Americans do. So they monitor you when you come in. They monitor you as the studies are progressing, and towards the end of your expected terminal date of your studies, they approach you and then remind you that you are only here for, let's say, for 4 years. And at the completion of your studies, you are expected to go back. So there's a continuous monitoring process there, where they also come to you at some point in time. And then if it is, for example, if it's in an industry where they want to invite you to stay, for example, medicine, they will propose something to the student, give them incentives, etc., to try and lure them in, to try and keep them back. So other countries have different ways of handling it. But the American system that we are talking about currently is a fire brigade approach that cannot last because there is a lot of cost implication. A lot of these universities, they kind of budget for the income of foreign students, and they use it to train for their research, for their salaries, etc., etc. So it cannot just completely wiped out. I believe this is just a temporary thing, and it will be ironed out in a more moderate way sooner than later.
Okay. All right. So I want to say a very big thank you to you, Ahmed Maboldu. Join us all the way from the United States of America this morning. So the event is still developing. It is still ongoing. I mean, this visa revocation by the U.S. authority is still ongoing. So we'll see how we follow and bring you the latest as it goes on.